IVM.
I want to thank Intel for supporting our show. We're all loving working from home, but let's be honest, there are complications. For example, getting help from IT folks if your PC is down can be challenging because you can't just walk up to them anymore. Well, you'll be happy to hear that I have a solution for you, the Intel vPro platform. The platform comes packed with Intel Active Management technology that lets your IT teams remotely manage your systems and fix the problems without having to go to them. So it means more time getting your work done and less time spent on getting support. Visit intel.in/morewithvpro, that's VPRO, to discover how you can do more of what you want and less of what you don't. If you're listening on the IVM Podcast Android app, click the link that's visible to you now.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello and welcome to All Things Policy. I am Utkarsh, and today I have with me Takshashila's resident economist Anupam Manur and a connoisseur of all things misgist and malinformation, Prateek Wagre. We are going to be talking about the Chinese apps which were banned by the Indian government yesterday. Prateek, can you give us some context? What were the apps that were banned and why were they banned?
Yeah, okay. So first, let me apologize. There is someone undergoing home renovation, so you might hear some drilling noise along with me. But yeah, that's the thing of working from home. Now, okay, coming straight back, right, is that, so this was really interesting. So on 29 June, close to 9 p.m., there was a press release that came out saying that 59 apps were being banned because they were prejudicial to the sovereignty and integrity of India. Right, and it also stated that there were concerns on data security and safeguarding the privacy of Indian citizens. Right now, the one thing that these apps all have in common is that they are Chinese, but that's not explicitly stated. And it includes some extremely popular and well-known ones like TikTok, UC browser, WeChat, Cam Scanner, right? A moment for all the government departments that upload their PDFs using Cam Scanner, right? ES File Explorer. So there are a lot of apps across different categories, right? So it's not that they've been restricted to just one. So, for example, there are some Me video call kind of apps, but then again, Me Pay kind of apps have not been included. So it's a little odd that it's unclear of what classification criteria went into selecting these apps. But, I think the end result is that there are 59 apps that can be thought of as Chinese, right? And we're basically saying that, okay, we're going to ban these apps. Now, the interesting question there is no one's really defined what a ban means, right? Does a ban mean you can no longer download these apps? Does a ban mean you can no longer use these apps, right? Is it now illegal for me to share content from TikTok on Twitter? Is it illegal for someone to upload a file scanned by Cam Scanner, right? If I have family in China, is it illegal for me to use WeChat and communicate with them, right? Or family, business contacts, whatever. So none of this has really been defined.
I think that's the really interesting question, Prateek. So, what can and cannot the government actually do? What is within their power to actually effectively do a ban? It's easy to call something as a ban, but if you could go into the details of what if I've already downloaded TikTok? Is it that I can't use it anymore? Are they going to block the IP addresses? What's the technical background to this?
Yeah, and that's interesting because there's a couple of things that they can do, right? In this area, even though it's not clear what a ban really means, but what they can do is they can ask the Apple, the App Store and the Google Play Store, right, to delist those apps. Now, what that does is it means you can't download new versions of the app, right? You may not be able to upload or update the app, right? It takes away that. But if you have the app, you can still continue using it, right? Now, to tackle that, what they can do is go to ISPs and various content delivery networks and have them block the domain names and the URLs that these apps or services use. The interesting part there is that it's not clear whether they will themselves draw up the list of host names and give it to them, or will they tell the ISPs, hey, you need to figure out what happened, right? Because someone has to then actually go and actually determine which are the host names that TikTok is using, right? Which are the host names that the videos get delivered on. And then explicitly go and block those.
Exactly. So that begs the question: how effective is it going to be, right? I mean, we know that government usually has a terrible record of actually implementing some of these bans. It's very difficult, especially in the internet, to successfully carry out a ban. And we know, for example, I mean, they try to block a whole bunch of porn sites, but everyone pretty much knows how easy it is to get around that ban, from using a VPN as a starting point to probably using even for some of these apps. If you really want to use it, I'm sure you can get the source files from elsewhere, right? What do you call that? APK? No, what?
The APK. Yeah.
The APK. Yeah, you can get the APKs from elsewhere. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of things you can do. Or if the company themselves don't want to respect the ban, let's say if things get worse, as of now, I think TikTok is trying to comply. But if the company themselves want to, just evade the ban, I'm sure they can just change the host name or something. The legends known as Pirate Bay has been doing this for a very long time, right? Torrent site. So there's a whole bunch of things both the companies themselves can do, the apps themselves can do, and of course what users can do. So how effective will a ban be?
It's very hard to say because, like you said, right, users have many different ways to bypass these bans, right? There's also the question
you can contact Pratik for a private tutorial later, but yeah.
Yeah. So our the experience with the Kashmir whitelist, right, where just to quickly come there, where they had to determine exactly which host names to allow. Right. In that case, we saw that list wasn't really well drawn up. Right. So there are questions of state capacity. The porn ban that you spoke about is an interesting example because there it seems that the ISPs have more discretion in what can or cannot be blocked. So in comparison, if I compare it to the allow list exercise, right, the Jammu and Kashmir allow list exercise, I think the porn ban is still more effective than that. Like you said, there are different ways to go around it, and some of these are risky, right? Because what's going to happen is that distribution of APKs is a big issue because you have malware laced APKs that someone can start passing around. Right? We saw that actually with even with Arogya Setu, there were a number of fake APKs that were being distributed that actually were malware, right? So people are looking to bypass the ban. They're also opening themselves to risks, right? And by banning that, you're effectively pushing these kind of behaviors, right? Again, VPNs are a good example because I don't expect many people will opt to use paid VPN services, right? Free VPN services are a security nightmare by themselves.
I think we have had a similar experience in Russia as well, right? When Telegram was banned.
So what happened there was that the Russian government basically said, we want to block Telegram. But so the bypass that Telegram put into place was a little different. It was not mainly from a user perspective. Telegram themselves used a technique that's called as domain fronting to get around this ban, right? And what domain fronting essentially means is you're saying that, hey, this request is for www.xyz.com, but it's actually for abc.xyz.com, or it can be for a completely different URL. The only thing that's required is that they are on the same they're on the same HTTPS certificate and that they share an origin infrastructure, right? Which in the days of cloud hosting, etc., is not that hard, right? That's normally the case, not normally the case anyway. Right?
So in very simple English, can I say that I have created infinite bit links of a single website? Is that what you are saying?
No, I wouldn't say infinite because there's still work to be done in terms of changing the host names that you communicate on. There is a limitation sometimes on how many names can be listed under a certificate. So it's not infinite. But it can, if someone does want to evade it, they can do that, and it can potentially lead to a cat and mouse game of blocking and then determining new host names and then going and blocking those, right? So it comes down to how much of an appetite any of these apps have to try and evade this ban on their end. right? But it is feasible. The other interesting thing that happened there was that as Russian efforts to block them got more aggressive, right? They finally said, okay, you know what, we're just going to go and block all IP addresses that are associated with Telegram. And what they ended up doing was they ended up blocking Amazon Web Services and Google Services IP addresses, IP ranges as well, because of which a number of other services were impacted and went down. Right. So it may not play out the same way here, because it remains to be seen how much of an appetite these guys have to evade. Right. And going by TikTok's early behavior, it seems unlikely that they are going to get into any sort of cat and mouse blocking game. But you know, there are ways around it. Google right now no longer allows domain fronting. Amazon CloudFront does allow it with certain restrictions, but typically most content delivery networks do let you do some form of domain fronting with a number of with some restrictions, right? So while it's unlikely that we'll see the top two or three apps doing this, because you know they have employees in India who can be held accountable under law or something like that. So they may not go this route, but some of the others might, right? But that also comes down to when this ban actually goes into effect, because as of now, most of them are still listed on the App Store, on the Play Store. They're still functional, with the exception of TikTok, who seem to have suspended their services, voluntarily, and are working directly with the government, making representations to them.
So my next question is, why this move happened, and why now?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting aspect of it. Now, obviously, the stated kind of response is that these pose, security threats and that they violate users' privacy and so on. And it's, again, a bit rich coming from the government of India, where we don't have a data privacy law, and we've basically sat on it for a long time and not really passed anything and so on. So it's a little bit difficult to kind of digest that the government suddenly woke up and is concerned about its citizens' privacy. But let's even take that at face value. And I think there is definitely a case to be made that, these are not the safest apps. And there has been, multiple instances of, I think, them sharing data with others. And finally, I mean, there's the amount of trust that there exists with a private firm coming from China is always going to be low, because, it's very difficult at times to distinguish between a private firm in China and the state, right? I mean, ultimately, if the state so wields its power, then any private firm will be, forced to give up data or anything else that it has. And that's the nature of, the Chinese government and the relationship between the state and its individuals and firms. So on that aspect, it seems to be not, it doesn't seem to be a move which is, it's not completely unjustified, because, as I said, there have been instances of malpractice and so on. Now, the why now question, I think, is very important, because we've obviously had all of these same issues since the very beginning. There's nothing which has changed in the last, in the last month or in the last 15 days or so, except, of course, what's happening at the border. So, you got to see that as a direct link, that this is as a posturing exercise by the Indian government to send a message of sorts. And we'll come to that slightly later on. But the other kind of point I also want to, just put out here, right at the big, not at the beginning, it's about midway mark. But, the other point that I want to talk about is we don't really, owe China anything on that front. We are not obliged to have an open and free market access, relationship with China, because it is definitely not reciprocal. Now, in just the previous webinar, podcast that I was doing with Pranay, I said reciprocity is not important, but we have to also, kind of remember that China has this massive firewall. China doesn't allow Indian apps. It tightly controls what comes in and goes out, etc. So, they have built this walled internet and so on. So we are not obliged to open up our gates completely. So in that sense, it is fine. And if at the end of it, we actually come out with better kind of privacy settings with some of these apps, then I think it's okay. So we'll see how that kind of pans out and plays out. But we'll come to the Galwan incident later. But this is just primary thought. And it was really funny listening to the Chinese kind of story, the Chinese embassy spokesperson said that this is, basically it's selective and it is discriminatory against Chinese apps, and that it could violate WTO rules. And that for me was extremely funny because it's, worse than whatever pot calling kettle black and so on. It's just seems like a very funny thing to come from the Chinese, who have, as I said, a complete firewall and they don't respect any of the WTO rules. So it's,
Pradeep,
the amount of hoops you need to get into to deliver content in China is ridiculous.
So there is definitely some legitimacy to the privacy argument. And now what I actually want to understand here is this. So TikTok is widely popular in the US as well. And the privacy policies, if I understand correctly, are not very different. So what are the actions that different legislations are taking and how are they thinking about it?
Yeah, so this remains a problem across, right? It's not just India that's concerned about TikTok. I think even in the US, even in Europe, they are fairly concerned about TikTok. TikTok themselves have been doing a lot to sort of allay these concerns, right? In the US, they've established something called a transparency center, which seems like it's going to work similar to the oversight board, but it's going to also give... It's not clear who's it going to provide access to, but it's going to provide some sort of access to its internal practices and code, etc. In the US, right? They've also taken a number of steps to move their moderation decisions outside of China. I don't know if that was the case in India yet, to be honest. It's not 100% clear where the Indian moderation decisions were finalized, but I think for the US, they had gone to the extent of moving them completely outside of China. But on the other hand, there have been a lot of security issues that have cropped up as well, right? Even as recently as last week, when the iOS 14 beta came out, people discovered that anything you type into TikTok, it was basically copying your clipboard.
Yeah.
Right? And someone also reverse engineered it and found that they were using some sort of workaround to determine which other apps are on your device, which iOS APIs typically don't allow you to do. So so there are definitely privacy concerns about and a lot needs to be improved on that front. As the world is trying to determine what to do with it, it's going to be interesting to see how maybe the action that India has taken might be used as precedent, right? For all I'm sure right now Donald Trump is not very thrilled about TikTok because TikTokers are claiming to lower the there was this whole incident, right, where a bunch of TikTokers went and signed up for his rally, and then not a lot of people turned up. The other campaign that they're running, is they're going to all their e-commerce properties and adding items to the cart and abandoning the cart, right? So they're trying to do these sort of things.
What does that entail? I'm sorry. Now I'm interested.
Yeah, it's actually, again, I'm not sure how effective it really is, right? It's probably just a signaling thing that we'll create a nuisance. But the idea is that they're going to various online Trump properties, adding things to their cart and just abandoning the cart. Because the assumption there is that, what happens is that a lot of the way e-commerce companies work, they tend to do a lot of analytics on abandoned carts and this and that, right? So you're basically just filling their system with noise and trying to waste their time.
Yeah, it's just mischief at best.
Right? Yeah, it's mischief, but it goes that I won't digress. It goes into a whole other conversation of what is good coordinated activity and what is bad coordinated activity on the internet. But yeah, I'm digressing a bit. But you can see for that, tomorrow he might get angry and say, what, let's issue an executive order to block TikTok. We don't know how this can play out. Right now, I think the purchase for this being presidential action is low, but you never know because people are dealing with increasing dominance of Chinese apps in local markets, and a lot of governments don't know how to deal with it.
Yeah. So I think on that it's quite clear that there's a whole bunch of sometimes deliberate malpractice, sometimes incompetence on the part of the Chinese apps where there are a lot of security threats and flaws, right? I think that, and of course, breach of individuals' privacy. To some extent, the individual, you can put the onus on the individual saying you have to be more careful, choose not to, have these apps, etc. But that argument can only go so far, given generally how difficult it is to understand these privacy rules and so on. The second aspect, of course, you can hold the apps accountable, and if one way is to ban them, but I think that's not a really permanent solution, because you ban 59 apps now. Tomorrow you can have another 59 which is doing pretty much similar things, and so you can't keep revising that list and keep banning things. That's obviously not the way to go. And then it comes down to the final aspect of all of this, which is that the onus also lies on the government, right? And on us, which is to say that we have to come up with a better privacy laws. We have to come up with, update our security standards. And there's a whole bunch of regulations that we can do to, minimize the effect of some of these things. And so, I mean, that's I think a longer term game, but we really, we've been saying this for quite some time. It's not that the issue has cropped up just overnight, where we've realized that there are, security issues. This has been, we've been talking about a data privacy law for I don't know how long now, and it's not just been tabled in the parliament yet. And the whole bunch of these things, we have to really up our game in terms of security standards, and we've not done that. So that big onus also lies on us, because you can't keep banning apps and websites and so on, whether it's Chinese or otherwise. There's only so much that you can do.
Yeah, and there's another country that's famous for banning apps, right? I guess they say, right, that saying, don't become the enemy you fight.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Exactly. I mean, then you're going to become like another China, right? And it's so funny, I'll be ironic. But yeah.
Yeah, so we understand that bans are blunt and they lack nuance, and in this particular case, they are not even as effective. And as Anupam, you said that we can disabuse ourselves of the notion that we owe Chinese anything, but to any policy action, there are costs that are incurred, right? So what are the costs of this action, and who will be the people who will incur these?
Yeah, so this is a funny thing. I mean, the intended recipient of the cost is supposed to be the Chinese apps. As in, you want to, you're kind of doing this to hurt the Chinese. But in fact, if you just look at the revenue structures, etc., of ByteDance and TikTok, it's not really huge. I mean, in 2019, for example, the first kind of complete year that TikTok was in, I think they made about $5.8 million in India, whereas their global revenue stream is about $17 billion, right? So that's less than 1%. And that should give you an indication. And you can just compare, by the way, you can compare India and the US market, for example, right? So in India, that kind of 18, 19, I have this in rupees. I mean, I should have converted it to dollars, but it's about 43.6 crores rupees that ByteDance made in India, whereas in the US it made, I think, about 650 crores, right? So 43 or 44 crores in India and about 650 crores in the US, and in China it was way more than 2,500 crores. So I mean, that again just gives you that sense of proportion that in terms of just revenue coming in, India is not really the biggest kind of source of revenue. However, having said that, it also has, I think India provides the largest kind of consumer base for TikTok. And I'm just picking on TikTok as one, right? I mean, because it's the most popular one. Everything else, it will be proportional for the other apps as well, whether it's UC browser or anything else. So just proportionally, or WeChat, right? So, but proportionally, I think India is not a big market. But in terms of just user base, India is massive. I think India is probably right after China. India is the biggest kind of provides the biggest user base for some of these apps. So that by itself, I mean, if it is a pure numbers game that you don't want to create revenue just now, like many of the platforms do, where you're trying to build a user base and then you will start getting revenue. Then I think, I mean, TikTok is in it for the long haul, right? The reason why they're also so being so compliant with the government right now is because they don't want to have an adversarial relationship with the government. They want to be here for the long haul, because obviously Indian market is going to be huge. I mean, there's 650 million or something. I'm not really sure. No, it can't be that number. But yeah, actually, there's a massive number of people, right, who are on TikTok. So
the monthly active users on TikTok in India is 120 million.
Okay.
On Share It is 200 million. UC Browser is 130 million.
Right.
Actually, I think 120 million is a little old. They had put out a release saying they've hit 200 million earlier this year, and at some point they were targeting to be at above 300 million by the end of the year. I guess we'll see how that goes.
So right now it's a customer acquisition strategy, and the monetization will come later on when the customers are captive.
Yeah, that's what you can see. That's one way to think about it, right? I mean, in terms of now you just want to get people to start using the app and as much as possible start creating content, which all of it was going on. And then you can always monetize it once you have where essentially consumers are locked into your product. And I think that was the long kind of strategy. So in that sense, of course, if this ban is for a long time, and if it's going to be in any way permanent of nature, then I think it's really going to hurt some of these companies at some point. But right now, I don't think so. I mean, it's, as I said, the revenue stream is quite small, and therefore it's not really going to make massive difference. So that's one thing that you have to remember. But I think the bigger not bigger, but one other cost that we really have to think about is the actual people who use TikTok, right? It was a source of entertainment for a lot of people. It also was truly democratized content creation in a place like India. I mean, so until now, YouTube was probably the only place where someone could, create videos and so on, and the quality was entirely different. You needed technical kind of expertise. You needed a whole bunch of things. It was not that easy to create content on YouTube or so on. Whereas in TikTok, I think anyone with a phone and the app can create content, which a lot of others would have seen as well. So, and that would have led to income stream for some of these TikTok influencers, right? Because ads pay for them and so on. There's product placement and so on. So it was lot easier for someone to gain fame on TikTok than it's on any other platform. And therefore, essentially it's a network good. And a lot of the value is in the value of the network itself, right? As to how many people you can reach out and how many people are connected to you in that sense, and in purely that sense, TikTok was truly democratic. And the big difference is, while I think Twitter and YouTube etc. is purely kind of urban in nature in India, TikTok was rural. It went to the villages. There were people from the villages who were creating content. I think that is one really big loss. I mean, again, this is not to say that there cannot or should not be an Indian equivalent or something else, but as of now, there is that vacuum.
Exactly. So a lot of the appeal of TikTok lied in its user base in the tier 2 cities, many of whom were actually first-time internet users.
Yeah.
So this actually truly democratized content creation. And while these TikTok influencers will face a certain cost if they do not have a stream, do not have a platform where they can create their content, the other thing that I wanted to understand here is this: that out of the 30 unicorns that India has, 18 of them have significant Chinese investments. So can we see certain retaliatory actions from the Chinese side? And would they impact or hurt India's prospects in the near future?
I think that is a very, very interesting thing to really think about. I mean, if that's a very serious cost that we should consider. Now, if you just looked at how the trade war was fought, right? Initially, the US-China trade war for goods and services, not really these things. You see that, first when Trump slapped the tariff and so on, China was still being very calm about it. They went to them, they tried to negotiate with Trump and his trade advisors and so on. And they actually asked for a reversal. They were very nice about it in the beginning. And once they came to know that, they're not going to budge, is when they started putting retaliatory tariffs. And when they put retaliatory tariffs, I think it really hurt the US economy. And I think the world followed that way. Mexico as well, in the beginning, they were still, waiting and seeing what was going to be done by Trump. And then when that, there was very serious kind of tariffs and, of course, stopping the movement of people, even Mexico put massive retaliatory tariffs, and that hit the entire agricultural economy of the US. So I in that sense, I think there is a very real risk that some of the, if not at least pulling back of the existing investment, which could happen, by the way, but at least new investments could dry up. And again, because China's society and economy is structured the way it is, you can imagine a diktat being given by the government saying no more investment in India. Now, of course, is that going to hurt Chinese companies? Yes. The reason why they're investing in Indian companies is because it's profitable. But again, China can and will be willing to, undergo some of these losses in order to, again, for them show again, send the message across and so on, right? So then you get into this real downward spiral of increasing kind of retaliatory measures from one country to the other. And that can cause real harm. That can cause real harm to both economies, but probably India more purely because of the size of the economy, right? China has a lot more diversified economy, and therefore I think can withstand a lot of these things, but I don't think India can. That's a big economic response.
So Prateek, are there any cyber responses that China can undertake which can hurt India?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things right now. Obviously, a similar reciprocal kind of ban is not possible because there are no Indian apps that are popular in China because that's the way they've designed their internet. Right? There can't be a foreign app that's as popular in China. But China is a very active participant in a lot of cybersecurity tactics, a lot of cybersecurity actions. It's nicknamed the Great Cannon, right? Which is essentially it's a distributed denial of service attack. So it is possible that that various cybersecurity actors there can start engaging in various type of web attacks, right? Ranging from DDoS attacks to actual higher level hacking and malware campaigns, right? So that is certainly possible. We've also seen, right, over the last 6 to 8 months, especially since the Hong Kong protests, that their information disorder operations have also evolved on global platforms pretty significantly, right? And you never know, all these platforms are global. They could start engaging on that front in India as well, right? There isn't a lot of evidence to say that at this point that there's a lot of attention that they're paying to India. I think most of their energy seems to be focused on the US and Western Europe. But if this continues, yes, we can certainly be a recipient of their information disorder operations as well.
Has there been a precedent with India about this?
So, I mean, there are, right? So it's not to say that they don't attack India at all. There are always these sort of cyber offensive campaigns that are going on, right? And I think if you speak to people in the cybersecurity industry in India, they will tell you that most of the incidents, most of the attacks do indeed come from China even today. But I expect that apart from very targeted campaigns, most of them are low-level attacks, right? Now, what we could see is an increase in the frequency of these low-level attacks or change in targets, right? Now, for example, we could look at they could look at taking down a service that we use daily, right? I think it was Anand who recently gave this example of what if they take down Big Basket, right? In this time, I think that's going to cause pretty significant pain to Indians, right? If you take down a bunch of these apps, right? So Indian businesses should probably also be preparing for some activity on that front. Get their web application firewall settings tuned, etc. There can be, but as they can choose not to go this way, and as Anupam already mentioned, that they can take the economic ladder for escalation. Maybe do both. So it's going to be interesting to see.
What if they did something to Netflix? My God.
Yeah, exactly. Right. If maybe Hotstar. If not Netflix.
Yeah. During whatever sporting cricket event or something, I think that will be the biggest problem. So that's a whole bunch of things that the Chinese can do, and I think it's in our interest not to escalate it to that point, purely in self-interest. And in any case, I mean, rounding this up, if we kind of think, we could take whatever has been happening as purely at face value. As I said, that there are security issues and so on, but they've always been. So the why now becomes important, and why so publicly. I mean, by the way, that Section 69A of the IT Act also enables the government to do all of this entirely discreetly, but we put out this big list out there in the open and so on. So I think a lot of this was just posturing. A lot of this is as a means to send a message to China, and of course, because there's border skirmishes. But then that really begs the question saying, is this the best thing you can do? I mean, you lose a whole bunch of territory and you lose a whole bunch of 20, the lives of 20 of your soldiers, and your best form of attack or retaliation is to ban a few apps where you can see people dancing. I mean, that seems like an extremely disproportionately lower form of response, right? So you got to, just keep that in mind, saying, is this the best kind of retaliation that India is capable of doing, instead of whatever, building up Navy assets in South China Sea or attacking somewhere else on the Himalayan borders in terms of a tit for tat. I'm going to leave that just there for the listeners to kind of weigh in their opinions and so on. Banning apps might not be the best form, especially given how the economic situation, that it really will not hurt some of these companies at all right now. So that's something to think about.
I think there's a big angle of who are you playing to and who are these narratives aimed towards, and what do you wish to achieve in the domestic sphere as versus the international sphere? And I think we'll not discuss this further and we'll leave it to our listeners to think about it. And on that note,
just to end, I want to say, right? We already have a pandemic. Let's not have a pandemic.
Sorry,
nice. I had to get that out of my system.
on that great pun. Thank you for joining us. You can follow Pratik at Pratik Wagre and Anupam at
Anupam Manoor.
And you can follow me at Utkarsh01. And thank you for joining us.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is at IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle at Takshashila INST or our website takshashila.org.in.
I hope you enjoyed that show. I'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Paytm Money and Intel. Really, really fun week, and I think that you guys should definitely check out some of the stuff we did. So we had Shifa Mehta, who is the host of the show Smile India, on the Paperback Podcast. Really fun thing. On Edges and Sledges, our hosts had an episode just amongst themselves. No guests this time. Really fun show with lots of cool banter. I think you'll enjoy that quite a bit. On Storytellers and Storysellers, Vineet had Shrishti Bell on. Shrishti is the head of Netflix in India, and I think you'll really enjoy that conversation as well. Also, do check out Uncle Please Sit. Joel and Tushar had Anuya Chatakar on. Anuya hosts the popular YouTube channel Books on Toast. And don't forget others of your old favorites like The Habit Coach, Football Should Ball, All Things Policy. All of them are doing a great job during this pandemic, and you should definitely check them out. And with that, we hope to see you again next week.
Namaskar, dear Bandhu. My name is Ashish Vidyarthi. These are truly challenging times, and in these times, we need hope. Do take time to listen to my podcast, Begin the Journey. Available on IVM Podcasts, website, app, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Remember, there is hope because there's one life and we are alive.